Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. On an unassuming Thursday evening in late October, the sun dipped below the horizon in the small, tight-knit town of Hartley Creek. The faint smell of wood smoke wafted through the air as residents settled into their routines, unaware that their lives were about to be irrevocably altered. Nestled within the Appalachian foothills, Hartley Creek offered a picturesque landscape, its rolling hills bespeckled with the fiery hues of fall leaves. This quaint town, with its charming white picket fences and friendly faces, had never known violence until now. At 8:17 p.m., the piercing shriek shattered the evening silence, a sound so dissonant it was as if the very heart of Hartley Creek had been ripped open. The sound came from the edge of town near the old Case.The farm, a decaying estate that had witnessed generations of families come and go, and which now stood as a mere whisper of its former self. A night watchman, Joe Myers, working the late shift at the nearby mill, was the first to respond to the commotion. Arriving moments later, his flashlight beam flickered ominously across the crumbling structure of the farm. What he found was an apparition of horror that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A lifeless body sprawled across the front porch, tangled in the remnants of a once vibrant, dark crimson stains seeped into the dry earth, mixing with the autumn leaves, as if nature herself mourned the grotesque scene. Joe's heart raced, and he fumbled for his radio, fingers trembling with an urgency he couldn't comprehend, the weight of the moment crashing down around him. Even in a town like Hartley Creek, crime was a rarity. This was meant to be a safe haven, far removed from the nightmares of the city. As sirens wailed in the distance, casting eerie shadows against the dim glow of porch lights, an unsettling realization settled over Joe. This was just the beginning. In the morning, the story of that fateful night would ripple through the town, seeping into the fabric of their lives, and forever altering their tranquil existence. The victim. As dawn broke over Hartley Creek, the warm glow of the sun bathed the town in a golden hue, a stark contrast to the chilling events that had transpired the night before. Emergency responders worked tirelessly at the Case.The farm, the property now cordoned off with bright yellow tape, a somber reminder of the horror that lay within. The news of the murder was swift, spreading like wildfire and plunging the residents into a state of disbelief. Who could have committed such a heinous act in their beloved town? The victim, as it would soon be revealed, was Sarah Bronta, a local school teacher, whose laughter could often be heard echoing through the quaint streets as she bike-ridden to the market. A dedicated educator, Sarah was adored by her students and held in high regard by parents and colleagues alike. With her friendly smile and nurturing spirit, she had become a touchstone for a community, a belief that grew stronger with every interaction. However, underneath the warmth and charm of Sarah's presence lay a life marked by struggle. Just months prior, she had faced a painful divorce that rattled her esteem. Friends noted her subtle changes in demeanor, and anxiety creeping into her formerly buoyant personality. Despite this, Sarah remained steadfast, her resilience often marveled at by those who knew her. But beneath the vibrant surface, dark clouds gathered, hinting at the turmoil she faced in silence. As investigators methodically examined the scene, they discovered a few personalized items scattered nearby: a silver locket that once belonged to her mother, a worn-out journal clutching fragments of breathtaking prose and aching vulnerability. Each artifact told a story, unraveling a deeper understanding of who Sarah was, a woman, trapped in a life she never intended to lead. With the sun rising higher, a heavy silence enveloped Hartley Creek, punctuated only by the low murmur of whispers and the scuttling of footsteps as families braced themselves for the unfolding tragedy. No one would ever look at their peaceful town the same way again. The weight of uncertainty hung thick in the air. Who wanted Sarah gone? And why? And the questions lingered, each unanswered beat echoing louder in their hearts. The crime scene. The early morning light struggled to penetrate the eerie stillness that enveloped the Cadenza farm, dulling the once vibrant colors of the landscape to a muted palette of browns and grays. As the forensic team arrived, clad in protective gear and equipped with a myriad of tools, the tension was palpable. Senior investigator Mark Delaney, a seasoned detective known for his meticulous attention to detail, took charge of the scene, his brow furrowed in concentration. The porch where Sarah's body lay was marked with haunting signs. Delaney began his examination, his eyes scanning the area for any clue that could illuminate the events of the previous night. Bloodstains marred the wooden floorboards, each drop a testament to the violence that had unfolded. Sarah's expression remained eerily peaceful, almost as if she were merely sleeping. But the dark reality of her demise shattered that illusion. Around her, the remnants of a half-tended garden spoke of her passions, the patch of miracles. Once blooming, now wilted and neglected, held a deeper significance in the delicate balance of her life. As he moved closer, Delaney noted how her hands lay lifeless over her chest, fingers curled as if still grasping for something, a final breath, a final hope. It was in moments like these that he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, the responsibility of ensuring justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves. With a gloved hand, he reached for the rocket. It swung gently, catching the light, revealing a polished sheen that seemed out of place amidst the grim surroundings. Delaney opened it to find a faded photograph of Sarah and her mother, smiling during happier times. The image struck a chord deep within. It embodied not just loss, but also connection. A life thread that now tragically lay severed. Investigators began to gather evidence across the scene, moving methodically in the cold morning air. Footprints led away from the porch, muddy and indistinct, hinting at a quick escape. Whoever had done this was not only violent, but calculated. As Delaney documented every piece of evidence, the urgency of the moment weighed heavily on him. This was more than just a crime. It was a personal violation, a fracture in the fabric of the town's very existence. And yet, as they combed through the crime scene, questions multiplied. Who would want to hurt Sarah? Was her troubled personal life connected to this tragedy? The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the porch, as Hartley Creek stood unwittingly on the brink of a journey filled with darkness and uncovered truths. With every passing hour, the layers of Sarah's life peeled away, revealing an intricate tapestry of emotions and mysterious connections that had yet to be fully understood. The early investigation. The day stretched into afternoon, and as the sun climbed higher in the sky, a heavy somberness clung to the air like an uninvited guest. You are on Hartley Creek, which had once radiated warmth and familiarity, now appeared shrouded in an unsettling gloom. Word of Sarah Grant's murder traveled swiftly, leaving a palpable tension in the wake of its way. For many, the prospect of a criminal investigation in their small town was both shocking and disorienting. Back at the station, Investigator Mark Delaney convened with his team. The atmosphere thick with determination. They piled photographs of the crime scene across the tabletop porch, where Sarah had breathed her last, the scattered remnants of her life, the glimmers of evidence yet to be deciphered. Each picture painted a grim narrative, intertwining Sarah's past with a present that demanded answers. Focus on her relationships. Delaney instructed, as he leaned closer to a particularly haunting photograph of the lock. First and foremost, her ex-husband, Daniel. They recently went through a contentious divorce, which may still weigh heavily on him. And then there's her colleague, Alice. Friends describe them as inseparable, but Alice was reportedly jealous of Sarah's success. As rumors swirled, roots of deep-seated jealousy and heartache began to emerge within the threads of testimony. Investigators fanned out across the town, knocking on doors and interviewing friends, colleagues, and family. Each session delved into the complex tapestry of Sarah's life, revealing layers only known to those who loved and cherished her. In the dimly lit break room, Delaney reviewed the findings. A single piece of information caught his attention. A witness had reported seeing a dark vehicle parked near the Cadenza farm the night of the murder, when the woman, an elderly resident who lived nearby, had leaned out her window to see what was happening. She had caught a glimpse of two figures arguing near the porch. "Get me a description of that vehicle," Delaney muttered, jotting notes on a notepad. Every detail mattered, a key that could unlock the mystery tightly clasped around Sarah's story. There was an urgency in the air. The sooner they could identify potential suspects, the closer they would be to peeling back the layers of deceit that cloaked her death. As night fell over Hartley Creek, the darkness brought a sense of foreboding, engulfing the town in uncertainty. Too many questions remained unanswered, as sorrow and fear intertwined in the hearts of its residents. In every shadow and flicker of light, they sensed the presence of a predator among them, lurking in plain sight. The investigation had only just begun, and the quest for justice echoed through the town, reverberating with every passing moment. The dead ends, as the days turned to weeks. The pulse of Hartley Creek began to quicken with anxiety. Townsfolk whispered behind closed doors, casting suspicious glances at one another, while grappling with the chilling reality that a murderer could hide among them. Investigators worked relentlessly, sifting through every piece of evidence, yet feeling the tight grasp of frustration with each passing lead that fizzled into nothing. Back at the station, Delaney sat hunched over a desk piled with Case.The, an amalgamation of leads that once shimmered with promise, but now lay dormant, suffocated by disillusionment. The dark vehicle had been traced, only to reveal itself as a family member of Sarah's neighbor, who had just been visiting for a weekend. The witness had mistaken the figure she saw arguing for something far more sinister, and each follow-up led to yet another dead end. As the investigation mounted in complexity, tension brewed within the team. Fiery reactions flared as doubts crept in. The pressure weighed heavily. The relentless chase for answers had rapidly devolved into an elusive labyrinth riddled with falsehood. Detective Marsden, Delaney's trusted partner, raised a weary hand to erase the board covered in names and connections, a skeletal map that seemed more like a fantasy than the logical progression they had hoped. Everyone seemed to have a plausible alibi. Delaney, Marsden sighed, frustration evident in her tone. I'm beginning to feel like we might not even scratch the surface of who Sarah really was. Still, Delaney pressed on, determined to peel back the layers of Sarah's life. Fueled by a need for justice that burned within him, he knew that the key to unlocking the truth lay within the intricate web of relationships that surrounded her secrets, hidden in the corners of shared glances and hushed conversation. With renewed resolve, Delaney reached for Sarah's journal, a collection of her innermost thoughts that he had yet to delve into deeply. As he began to read, small fragments of her struggles began to emerge, moments of doubt, unease, and the rough edges surrounding her friendships. The journal spoke vividly of her efforts to navigate a path between the pressures of teaching and the heartache of her recent divorce. It was an unfiltered glimpse into a world that had been cherished, yet riddled with conflict. Suddenly the pieces began to stir in Delaney's mind. "Maybe we missed something," he murmured, his fingers tracing the ink on the brittle pages. "There's got to be someone who knew about her state of mind, someone who might have felt threatened by who she was becoming." The flickering of hope ignited within him, urging him to dig deeper into Sarah's relationships once again. As night cloaked the office, Delaney's focus intensified. The shadows of doubt began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning will to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. They were not finished yet. The investigation would not be contained by dead ends. The heart of the case remained out there, and he would find it. A break in the case. With every turn that the investigation took, the weight of uncertainty was almost unbearable. Yet, amid the shadows and uncertainty, there was a flicker and ember of clarity that had been ignited by Sarah's journey. As Delaney continued to sift through her words, a name began to surface, echoing like a chime in the back of his mind. Dallas Mercer. Woven through pages, filled with admiration, yet laced with hints of frustration. Delaney re-examined the notes collected about Alice, a colleague who had shared a classroom with Sarah for 3 years. Each account painted Alice as both a friend and a fierce competitor, admired for her own teaching prowess, but perhaps threatened by Sarah's popularity. The vivid portrayal of their complex friendship began to suggest layers of jealousy that could transcend mere rivalry. "Let's bring her in for questioning," Delaney decided, his resolve strengthened. "I want to see how she reacts, how she talks about Sarah now that she's gone. There might be more beneath the surface." The following day, Alice arrived at the station, her demeanor oscillating between sorrow and unease. Delaney led her into the interview room, a stark white space that felt too small for the heaviness of their conversation. As he began to probe gently, Alice spoke of her admiration for Sarah's teaching style, offering memories that blossomed amidst an air of strained sincerity. Yet, with every compliment, Delaney felt an undercurrent of tension pulsing just beneath the fabric of her words. He hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty clouding her eyes. She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty clouding her eyes. I know. We talked about lesson plans, and that was it. Just lesson plans, Delaney pressed, noting the tensing of her shoulders. You had known her for years. Surely there is more. Alice shifted uncomfortably. We had our disagreement, she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt we were friends, but something changed after her divorce. She became different, more focused on herself. The air thickened as Delaney felt the shift. Hearing fragments of anger just below the surface, revealing itself in the subtle cracks of Alice's demeanor. Could the resentment she felt have crossed a precipice she could not return from? Oh, their conversation could drift further into ambiguity. An unexpected knock broke the tension, and a junior officer carried in new evidence, a copy of Sarah's phone records. As Delaney scanned the details, his heart raced. Among her contacts stood a number marked unknown, padded with late-night messages leading into the evening of the murder. Look at this, he proclaimed, turning back to Alice, who paled at the sight of the document spread before her. Do you know who this is? Her gaze faltered, a flicker of recognition flashing across her face before she quickly glazed over it, retreating into more defensiveness. It's just someone she was texting. It doesn't mean anything. Not just anyone. This is someone she felt compelled to keep secret. Delaney pressed, the pieces of the puzzle drawing closer together. The encounter shifted from an ordinary conversation to the pivotal moment of the investigation, with the prospect of unearthing Sarah's hidden ties looming large. The spark of hope ignited within Delaney, aware that this could be the breakthrough they desperately needed. Each clue, each revelation could lead them closer to the truth that had eluded them for so long. The shadows encircling Hartley Creek began to feel less oppressive. Answers were finally within reach. A suspect. The atmosphere in the station buzzed with a newfound energy as Delaney and his team rallied around the fresh insights gleaned from Alice Mercer's interview. Concrete trails often veered toward ambiguity, but the unknown number attached to Sarah's phone records represented a distinct pivot. Something sinister lurked beneath the surface of a life seemingly filled with light. As Delaney dissected the intricacies of those final messages, he soon discovered that they had been exchanged with a man named David Rogerson, acquaintance of Sarah's from college, with whom she had reconnected months before her death. Initial impressions painted him as charismatic, but a deeper look revealed an unsettling history. David had faced domestic abuse charges years prior, a brush with law enforcement that faded but was hardly forgot. The team worked tirelessly to piece together his connection to Sarah. There were late-night phone calls and shared emotions, both shared with a sense of yearning that spoke to the vulnerability she had exhibited in her journal. Yet, as Delaney unearthed discrepancies in his timeline, an unsettling realization crept in. David was in town the night of Sarah's murder. Delaney opted for a careful approach, not wanting to alert David to the scrutiny lurking just below the surface. They organized a tactical interview, a meeting that felt more like a game of chess than a straightforward inquiry. David arrived casually, exuding a confidence that clashed with the growing apprehension in Delaney's gut. "David, thanks for coming." Delaney greeted him, gesturing to his seat. In the unadorned interrogation room, his tone remained congenial, though his keen eyes held a disquieting focus. As Delaney began discussing Sarah's recent struggles post-divorce, he watched David's reactions meticulously, his tight-lipped smile, the way he shifted in his seat. "Sarah talked fondly of you, mentioned how nice it was to reconnect," Delaney remarked, leading him down a path of casual familiarity. But as the conversation unfolded, David's confidence morphed into defensiveness. Whenever Sarah's name arose linked to her demise, he would visibly flinch, a reaction not lost on Delaney. "I don't know why you're bringing this up. We were friends, nothing more," David asserted. Yet the quiver in his voice told a different story. Delaney leaned in closer, the pulse of the room quickening. There were messages exchanged in the hours leading up to her death. What were you two talking about? Panic flickered behind David's eyes, the veneer of composure cracking as he stammered for a convincing answer. We were discussing her feelings about her teaching job, maybe some personal stuff. It was just a friend trying to offer support. Every word felt rehearsed in an effort to downplay something that ran much deeper. Delaney watched as David worked to gather his thoughts, the tightness around his jaw revealing the tension twisting within. A photograph became the focal point of the room. Taken just weeks before Sarah's death, David standing beside her. Their smiles a troubling juxtaposition to the grief, now emanating from the same space. Did you see her the night she died? Delaney prodded, seeking the breaking point. The moment where the truth might slip through the cracks of David's carefully cultivated facade. I didn't, he stammered, a pinprick of desperation surfacing in his voice. I mean, I was in town, but I didn't go see her. The weight of his contradiction loomed larger than ever. Each inquiry pulled tighter around David's conscience, hinting at a man desperately grasping for a lifeline, wild and snared in shadows he could no longer escape. Delaney could feel the intoxicating tension of the hunt, the idea that they were finally edging closer to the answers that had eluded them since the beginning. As their conversation continued, a single truth solidified in Delaney's mind. David Rogers was no longer just a person of interest. He had become a suspect, and the dark threads of his connection to Sarah Brandt wove a tapestry steeped in suspicion that would either unravel in the light or succumb to the depths of darkness that surrounded them all. The trial. Months had passed since Sarah Brandt's untimely death, and as the trial approached, Hartley Creek braced itself for the storm ahead. Life in the town had transformed. The once peaceful streets now buzzed with anticipation and dread, residents fervently discussing the case in hushed tones as they moved through their daily lives. The courtroom became the new focal point, the stage upon which secrets would spill forth, raw emotions would rise to the surface, and the quest for justice would unfold. David Rogers sat at the defendant's table, his expression a mask of tight-lipped composure, but Delaney knew better. He observed the way sweat beaded at his temples, and how he clenched his hands together, betraying the facade that he wore so carefully. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension as family, colleagues, and community members took their seats, achingly aware they would bear witness to the crumbling of a life altered forever. The day began with the prosecution painting a vivid picture of Sarah's life year. Beloved teacher who had touched countless lives. They illuminated the myriad ways her laughter had filled hallways and classrooms, highlighting her dedication and authenticity. Then came the darker details, the charged exchanges with David, the late-night phone calls, the desperation that seeped into her journal, a life marked by turmoil, and the shifting sands of relationships. But each witness called to the stand deepened the impression of Sarah as a woman on the precipice of reclaiming her life, only to have it snuffed out in an act of violence that felt almost unfathomable. Delaney watched intently, aware of the growing morale in the room, bolstered by the collective heartache that tethered everyone present to her memory. As the defense took their turn, Delaney braced himself for the inevitable shift. They sought to create shadows of doubt, emphasizing the lack of concrete evidence linking David directly to the crime. What about her other connection? They questioned, shifting the narrative to insinuate the town's collective blame had clouded judgment. Witnesses were presented former spouses, colleagues, even acquaintances, all attempting to paint a portrait of Sarah that hinted at tumult in her life independent of David. Their words thought to blur the sharpness of intention, stretching the definitions of grief and heartbreak into a haze of uncertainty. Delaney felt the urgency within him, rising a frustration towards those who would dismiss the truth, keen to protect their own interests. Only in the moments when Sarah's journal excerpts were read did the emotional gravity of the situation reverberate through the room. The intimate struggles of a woman who yearned for autonomy and understanding, bringing momentary silence. When the moment arrived for Delaney to take the stand, he recounted the meticulous details of the investigation, David's alibi, breaking under scrutiny, the uncharacteristic inconsistencies that plagued his statements in the clandestine relationship that spiraled into tragedy. Delaney felt as if he were revisiting the agony of the crime scene itself, the sense, the emotions, the rawness that lingered like a haunting echo. As weeks wore on, the prison of anticipation tightened around everyone. The jury deliberated, but time felt as unyielding as the weight of Sarah's absence that hung thick in the air. Rumors swirled outside, friends grappling with loyalty and fear, an overwhelming desire to protect their own while demanding justice at any cost. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The courtroom was silent, filled with a breathlessness that felt almost tangible. The jury filed back in, their expressions unreadable. When the foreman stood, the room reached a fever pitch, each person gripping the edge of their seats, hearts synchronized in a shared anxiety. We, the jury, find the defendant, David Rogers, guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Sarah Gray. A wave of emotions flooded the room. Gasps and muffled sobs intermingled as community members grappled with the verdict. Delaney felt an overwhelming rush of relief. Justice had been served. Yet it was bittersweet. Sarah's absence loomed large. And though they had found culpability, the wound left in the fabric of Hartley Creek would take much longer to heal. As the gavel struck one final time, echoing through the chamber, Delaney reflected on the ache of loss nestled within triumph. They had fought to unveil the truth, yet it came at the cost of a vibrant life extinguished far too soon. The town would work to move forward, forever changed, but Sarah Grant would remain woven into its narrative, a reminder of resilience in the face of darkness. The aftermath. In the weeks and months that followed the trial, Hartley Creek began to grapple with the aftermath of Sarah Grant's murder and the subsequent conviction of David Rogers. The community, which had once thrived amid the innocence of small-town life, now found itself navigating an uneasy equilibrium, caught between the scars of grief and a longing for healing. Memorials sprang up along the sidewalks of Main Street, handmade tributes adorned with flowers and notes from students who had shared classrooms with Sarah. The town school district dedicated a scholarship in her name, ensuring that her passion for education would continue to inspire future generations. Yet with each gesture, there was an undercurrent of lingering sorrow, a stark reminder of the light that had been snuffed out too soon. Delaney watched as the landscape of Hartley Creek shifted. The once familiar faces now carried the weight of shared trauma. Whispers of what happened that night echoed in the corners of shops and cafes, intertwining with the nostalgia of happier times gone by. Residents who had previously embraced open hearts and welcoming smiles now eyed each other with an edge of suspicion, forever touched by the specter of violence that had trespassed into their lives. Among the townsfolk, Alice Mercer bore her own burdens. In the wake of trial testimony, The guilt of survival settled heavily on her shoulders. Friends and colleagues had started to distance themselves, unsure of how to engage with someone who had once been so close to Sarah. The remnants of their friendship felt like shards of glass, each interaction echoing with the unresolved tension of the past. Delaney often returned to his own home feeling the weight of the case echo within him. While he recognized the justice served, the empty space left by Sarah was palpable. Her absence echoed in the halls of the school he passed daily, and he lamented the moments lost, the laughter that would never again fill the air. On rainy evenings, moments would resurface in his mind: her smile, her fierce spirit, the innocent vibrancy that had endured through darkness. As the seasons began to shift from the vibrant hues of autumn into the cold grasp of winter, Delaney confronted the growing realization that healing wouldn't come easily. The murder may have been solved, but the emotional fractures ran deeper than anyone anticipated. He began to organize community meetings, inviting residents to share their feelings and to foster understanding, encouraging conversations where silence had previously ruled. In those gatherings, the stories ebbed and flowed, an exploration of collective memory, pain, and the resilience to forge ahead. Slowly, the walls of mistrust began to crack. And although the road to healing would be long and winding, a flicker of hope ignited among neighbors who had once been so connected, now rediscovering their shared humanity. Delaney reflected often on the responsibility he bore as both a keeper of the truth and a champion for the healing of the town. He knew that Sarah deserved more than the tragedy that had consumed her life. She deserved the legacy of connections rewritten in the wake of sorrow, paths forged in compassion, and a community united in the face of loss. And so, in the heart of Hartley Creek, where darkness once lingered, a fragile light began to emerge, flickering against the shadow. It was a testament to the enduring spirit of those left behind, an affirmation that while tragedy might briefly fracture their lives, the fabric of their togetherness could be sewn anew, letting Sarah's presence shine on through their shared actions. And unending love. Reflection. As winter settled over Hartley Creek, a hush wrapped itself around the town like a thick blanket of snow. The chilling winds carried echoes of the past, whispering stories of sorrow through the streets that had witnessed both tragedy and resilience. Delaney found himself caught in moments of quiet contemplation, reflecting on the case that had both transformed him as an investigator and interconnected the community in ways he had once thought impossible. In the solitude of his office, fatigued yet fulfilled, Delaney mulled over the journey that had unfolded. Sarah's murder had unearthed not just the darkest inclinations of humanity, but also the shimmering kernel of hope that lay dormant beneath the surface. He reminded him of the fragility of life, of how easily it could be plucked from existence, and how equally important it was to cherish those still standing beside him. He recalled the faces of the townsfolk, their eyes brimming with grief at the trial, but now beginning to spark with determination to reclaim joy. Underneath this shared pain, he had seen the emergence of a community willing to engage, support, and heal through their collective grief. The evening meetings had birthed a cathartic alliance. It was a testament to their shared humanity that transcended fear.